Lena had always been drawn to the quiet magic of nature. As a child, she spent countless hours exploring the woods near her home, marveling at the intricate network of flora and fauna. With age, her passion deepened, leading her to pursue a career in botany where she could immerse herself in the study and preservation of plants. Over the past decade, she transformed her modest backyard into a sanctuary for rare and endangered species, cultivating an oasis that not only showcased her dedication, but also contributed to global biodiversity efforts. Her garden was a patchwork of vibrant colors and textures, bustling with life. Lena meticulously selected each plant, ensuring that each specimen played a role in the delicate tapestry of her ecosystem. From delicate orchids to robust ferns, every plant had its story, its significance. This wasn't just a hobby for Lena, it was a commitment to preserving the planet's natural heritage. Her work was part of a UN-sponsored biodiversity preservation project aimed at safeguarding endangered species worldwide. Each seed she planted held the potential for greater ecological impact, and each blossom that opened was a testament to years of hard work and perseverance. Despite her introverted nature, Lena found fulfillment in knowing that her efforts aligned with a noble cause. The project provided her not only with resources, but also a sense of belonging among fellow scientists and conservationists who shared her vision for a greener future. These connections fueled her motivation, giving her hope that every small contribution mattered in the fight against climate change and habitat loss. However, Lena's tranquil world faced an unexpected disruption when the Homeowners Association, HOA, sent her a formal notice. Their claims were shocking. They alleged that her flourishing garden violated their strict, uniform landscaping rules. To Lena, this felt like a personal attack on her identity as a botanist and environmental steward. The HOA's demand seemed ludicrous. How could nurturing endangered plants be considered a violation? The letter issued an ultimatum, ordering Lena to remove her plants by the end of the month or face legal action. They insisted that the space was needed for a new community relaxation garden, which they claimed would benefit everyone in the neighborhood. To Lena, this excuse felt hollow. It seemed more about aesthetics than actual community welfare. The thought of allowing concrete and manicured grass to replace her irreplaceable plants filled her with dread. Determined not to back down without a fight, Lena decided to attend the next HOA meeting to voice her concerns. As she prepared her speech, carefully outlining the scientific importance of her garden and its role in biodiversity preservation, she hoped to convey not just her passion, but also the larger implications of their decision. Maybe, just maybe, she could convince them to reconsider. When the night of the meeting arrived, Lena's heart raced as she entered the packed room. She spotted familiar faces among her neighbors, some supportive, others skeptical, and took a deep breath before stepping up to address the board. With grace and conviction, she explained how each plant contributed to endangered species recovery programs and emphasized that her backyard served not only as a sanctuary, but also as an educational tool for the community. Instead of receiving the respect she sought, Lena was met with laughter from some members of the board. Their dismissive chuckles stung, echoing through the room as they mocked her commitment to science in favor of their mundane vision for uniformity. "You can't be serious," one board member sneered. "Plants don't belong here when we have a community relaxation garden to build." Overwhelmed by their indifference and hostility, Lena felt her resolve weaken. Yet, even as frustration bubbled within her, she reminded herself why she was there. Her mission was bigger than any personal setback. She took a moment to regain her composure before addressing their threats directly. She refused to allow them to intimidate her into abandoning what she loved. As the meeting concluded with no resolution and threats of legal action hanging over her head like dark clouds, Lena felt defeated but not broken. In desperate need of support, she reached out to her research coordinator at the UN's Environmental Science Division. She explained the situation unfolding in her neighborhood with palpable urgency, hoping that someone would understand the gravity of what was at stake. Days later, as Lena went about her daily tasks in the garden, tending to delicate seedlings and watering established plants, a knock at her door startled her from her focus. When she opened it, she found a messenger holding a large envelope bearing the official seal of the United Nations. Her heart raced as she accepted it with trembling hands. Inside was a letter addressed to the HOA, detailing their obligation to uphold international biodiversity agreements and protect green spaces vital for ecological balance. The letter emphasized that Lena's garden was part of a global effort recognized by environmental authorities around the world. It not only demanded that they cease their threats, but also underscored the importance of supporting local biodiversity projects like hers. As news spread regarding the UN's involvement, Lena found herself at the center of an unexpected media frenzy. Headlines splashed across newspapers labeled it the HOA that tried to bulldoze science, capturing public outrage and sympathizing with Lena's plight. Social media platforms buzzed with support from environmental activists rallying behind her cause. Diplomats and global environmental groups began speaking out in solidarity, amplifying awareness about the importance of grassroots conservation efforts. In the face of mounting pressure from various fronts, public opinion, media coverage, and international scrutiny, the HOA found themselves cornered. Faced with backlash from residents who had once been indifferent or complacent about their tactics, they grudgingly retreated from their earlier demands. Ultimately, after intense negotiations and public outcry, Lena's garden was officially registered as a protected site. The transformation from conflict to recognition was monumental. Plaques were installed throughout the garden explaining its global significance and educating visitors on biodiversity preservation. As news broke that the HOA president resigned in disgrace following community backlash against their actions, Lena stood amidst her beloved plants feeling victorious yet humbled. With every bloom that opened under her care, she remembered why she had fought so fiercely. For every rare species thriving in her backyard stood as a symbol of resilience against indifference and ignorance, a testament to nature's ability to flourish when given love and protection. The tranquility of Lena's garden was abruptly shattered when she received the formal notice from the Homeowners Association, HOA. It arrived in a plain envelope, bearing the HOA's logo, a stark reminder of the rigid community rules that governed her neighborhood. Lena's heart sank as she read the words that allocated her plants to nothing more than a violation of their uniform landscaping standards. The notice claimed her garden was an eyesore, an affront to the aesthetic uniformity that the association enforced. The HOA was not merely suggesting she alter her landscaping, they were issuing an ultimatum. She had 1 month to strip her beloved sanctuary bare or face legal consequences. The reason? They needed the land for a new community relaxation garden, a project that sounded innocuous enough but felt deeply threatening in Lena's eyes. She envisioned rows of manicured grass and generic ornamental shrubs taking the place of her diverse collection of endangered species, a stark contrast to the life and vibrancy that had flourished under her careful stewardship. As she sat at her kitchen table, staring at the letter, a whirlwind of emotions coursed through her. Anger bubbled alongside a sense of helplessness. How could they dismiss years of dedicated work, care, and passion for something so banal? For Lena, each plant represented something more than mere aesthetics. They embodied her commitment to biodiversity and conservation. The thought that the HOA could impose such a demand was both baffling and infuriating. Determined to defend her garden, Lena prepared herself for what would be a pivotal moment in this conflict. She decided to attend the next HOA meeting. As an introvert, public speaking was not something she relished, but the stakes were far too high for her to remain silent. She meticulously crafted her speech, focusing on how each plant contributed to biodiversity and played a role in conservation efforts. She rehearsed it repeatedly, imagining how she could convey the importance of her garden not just for herself, but for the entire community. The night of the meeting arrived, and as Lena entered the community center, she felt a mix of apprehension and resolve. The room buzzed with chatter among neighbors seated around long tables, some familiar faces looking on with curiosity while others appeared skeptical. When it was finally her turn to speak, she rose from her seat and approached the podium with a deep breath. "Thank you for allowing me to address you all," she began, her voice quavering slightly but steadily gaining strength as she continued. "My garden is not just an assortment of plants. It's part of a global effort to preserve endangered species and educate our community about biodiversity." She described how many of her plants were integral to recovery programs for various species, emphasizing their ecological significance. Through her words, she painted vivid images of bee populations thriving in blooming flowers and rare orchids standing proudly against extinction. But rather than responding with support or curiosity, some board members reacted with dismissive chuckles and condescending smirks. One board member leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms with an expression that suggested he couldn't take her seriously. "You can't be serious," he quipped loudly enough for others to hear. "This is a neighborhood, not a science experiment." Lena felt heat rush to her cheeks as laughter echoed around her. It was a painful reminder of how little they understood or cared about what she was trying to accomplish. She swallowed hard, fighting back tears that threatened to spill over. Realizing that logic would not sway them in this setting, Lena shifted gears slightly. This garden serves not just as my personal project but as an educational tool for our community, she pressed on, trying to reconnect with their sense of community pride. Imagine school groups visiting to learn about these endangered species and their role in our ecosystem. However, instead of engaging with her argument or considering any alternative perspectives, the HOA board remained entrenched in their plans for uniformity. The meeting ended with no resolution, only threats looming over Lena's head like dark clouds ready to unleash their storm. That night was restless. Sleep eluded her as thoughts churned through her mind like leaves caught in a turbulent wind. She knew she needed help beyond what local arguments could provide. It was time to reach out to those who understood the significance of global biodiversity preservation. Lena decided to contact her research coordinator at the UN's Environmental Science Division. With urgency coursing through every word she typed in an email, she detailed her predicament, the HOA's cruel ultimatum, and its implications for conservation efforts. She expressed hope that there might be support available from those who recognized the value of environmental science. Days passed agonizingly slowly until one afternoon there was a knock at her door that sent a jolt through her heart. Standing there was a messenger holding an envelope adorned with the official UN seal. As she accepted it with trembling hands, anticipation mixed with anxiety surged within her. Inside was a letter addressed specifically to the HOA, thoroughly detailing their responsibilities under international biodiversity agreements and stressing the necessity of protecting vital green spaces like hers. The letter condemned any actions that undermined local conservation efforts and highlighted how critical these projects were not just locally, but globally. As news spread about this sudden intervention from such a prestigious organization, Lena found herself thrust into an unwelcome spotlight. A media frenzy surrounding the conflict spilled across headlines both locally and internationally. Reporters labeled it the HOA that tried to bulldoze science, igniting conversations far beyond her quiet neighborhood. Support began pouring in from environmental activists who rallied behind Lena's cause across social media platforms. Diplomats took note as well. Leaders from various organizations saw this situation not merely as local drama, but as emblematic of larger issues related to community engagement and environmental protection. Under intense scrutiny and public pressure mounting from all sides, the HOA found themselves trapped between their rigid bylaws and growing public outrage over their actions against Lena's garden. With residents who had previously remained silent now voicing their support for Lena's cause, it became clear that their stance was increasingly untenable. In this unexpected twist of events, Lena realized that what had once felt like an uphill battle had turned into a movement much larger than herself, a testament to how personal passion can spark collective action when faced with ignorance and indifference. As Lena stood before the imposing panel of the Homeowners Association, anxiety danced in her stomach, but she was resolute. This meeting represented a critical juncture in her life, one that called for bravery and determination. Clutching her notes tightly, she prepared to defend not just her garden but also a cause she held dear, biodiversity preservation. "Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight," she began, her voice steadying as she focused on her mission. "I understand that there are rules regarding landscaping in our community, but I urge you to consider the importance of my garden. It is part of a UN-sponsored biodiversity preservation project aimed at safeguarding endangered species." As she spoke about the intricate connections between plants and their ecosystems, drawing on examples of how her endangered species contributed to both local and global ecological health, she could see some eyebrows raised skeptically among the board members. "Each plant in my garden has been carefully selected not just for its beauty, but for its role in supporting wildlife," she continued passionately. "These plants provide habitats for pollinators, help combat climate change by sequestering carbon, and serve as vital resources for scientific research." However, rather than responding with curiosity or support, the board members exchanged glances tinged with disbelief. One board member chuckled dismissively, leaning back in his chair as if to underscore how trivial he deemed her efforts. "You really think this garden is going to save the world?" he scoffed loudly enough for others to hear. His condescending laughter echoed through the room like thunderclouds rolling in before a storm. Lena felt heat rush to her cheeks as humiliation washed over her. The laughter stung deeply. It cut through the passion she had poured into every aspect of her gardening and advocacy work. How could they belittle something so significant? Her heart raced as she pressed on despite their derision. "I'm not asking you to understand everything about environmental science," Lena implored, trying to bridge the gap between their perception and her reality. "But I am asking you to recognize that this garden has educational value, not just for me, but for our community as well." She envisioned schoolchildren learning about ecology while wandering through her plants' vibrant foliage. Yet instead of grappling with her points or considering any alternative viewpoint, the HOA members continued their mockery. "It's nice you have this hobby," another board member chimed in with an exaggerated smile, "but let's be honest, we can't have a science experiment taking over our neighborhood." With each disparaging comment echoed around the table, Lena felt the walls closing in on her dreams and ambitions, her sanctuary reduced to mere folly in their eyes. She took a deep breath, refusing to let tears betray her resolve. "This isn't just a hobby, it's an effort that resonates beyond our community." But their indifference remained palpable. They were entrenched in their mission of uniformity, without regard for what Lena had created or what it meant to broader environmental goals. The meeting dragged on without resolution, as threats hung heavily over Lena's head like storm clouds threatening rain that never fell, the ultimatum still looming ominously. As discussions shifted away from her plight and moved toward other topics like upcoming neighborhood events or mundane complaints about noise levels from pets, Lena felt utterly defeated, yet internally aflame with determination. Returning home that night was an arduous journey marred by swirling thoughts of despair and frustration. How could people be so blind? She understood that many simply didn't grasp the urgency of conservation efforts like hers. Perhaps they hadn't been exposed to nature's fragility firsthand. Yet surrender was not an option she was willing to entertain. After tossing and turning restlessly in bed, Lena resolved that it was crucial to find allies who truly understood the consequences at stake, not just locally but globally. The next day dawned bright and hopeful, ringing with new opportunities even amidst darkness, an opportunity she seized eagerly. She drafted an email to her research coordinator at the UN's Environmental Science Division detailing all that had unfolded since receiving the HOA's ultimatum. With urgency coursing through every word typed onto the screen, Lena expressed hope that there might be support from people who recognized how significant local biodiversity projects were within international frameworks dedicated toward environmental protection and sustainability. Days turned into weeks filled with apprehension until finally, a knock at her door shattered the silence one afternoon. As Lena opened it wide-eyed with anticipation mingled with anxiety, standing before her was a messenger holding an envelope adorned conspicuously with the official UN seal, an emblem representing hope and authority. With trembling hands brimming with excitement, yet fear of what lay inside this letter wrapped tightly around her heart's base, to know someone powerful had taken notice. The moment felt surreal yet monumental all at once. Inside was a letter addressed specifically to the HOA, a letter outlining their obligations under various international biodiversity agreements, and emphasizing their duty to protect vital green spaces such as hers from unnecessary destruction due solely based upon aesthetic preferences alone. News spread swiftly across neighborhoods far beyond hers, as headlines emerged locally, then internationally heralding this unexpected intervention from such a prestigious body dubbed the HOA that tried to bulldoze science. Each article sparked conversations among activists demanding further protection measures while amplifying awareness surrounding grassroots conservation initiatives everywhere. Support flooded in quickly from environmental advocates rallying behind Lena's cause across social media platforms, where hashtags tied directly toward ecological integrity amassed thousands of followers overnight. Diplomats took note too. Prominent figures within organizations observed these events unfolding not merely as localized drama, but potentially illuminating critical larger issues related toward community engagement, alongside essential environmental safeguarding strategies too. Faced now by public scrutiny mounting relentlessly on all sides, the HOA found themselves cornered within rigid bylaws versus growing outrage over actions taken against someone passionately committed toward preserving nature's delicate tapestry. With residents who once quietly nodded along now shouting out resoundingly behind Lena's cause, it became apparent swiftly that resistance against such ignorance would yield more than mere conflicts ahead. It signified hope arising miraculously amidst adversity instead. As the echo of laughter from the HOA meeting lingered in her mind, Lena sat at her kitchen table, her heart heavy with frustration and determination. The dismissive attitude of the board members had left her feeling more isolated than ever, but their mockery only fueled her resolve. She realized that she needed allies who understood the importance of biodiversity and her commitment to conservation, not just her neighbors who seemed entrenched in their rigid vision of uniformity. In a moment of clarity, she remembered the support she had received from her research coordinator at the United Nations Environmental Science Division during her years working on the Biodiversity Preservation Project. That connection could be pivotal in this battle. Perhaps they could provide the backing she desperately needed. With renewed focus, she opened her laptop and began to write an email detailing her plight. "Dear Dr. Martinez," she typed, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she poured out her concerns. She explained the ultimatum issued by the Homeowners Association, emphasizing how it threatened not only her garden, but also the broader mission of supporting endangered plants that were vital to local ecosystems. She described how each plant was part of an intricate web of life that played a crucial role in maintaining ecological balance. As she articulated her call for assistance, Lena felt a deep sense of urgency and hope. The potential repercussions of the HOA's demands extended beyond her backyard. They encompassed a larger fight against environmental ignorance and apathy. She pressed send and felt a mixture of anxiety and anticipation wash over her. Would they take her concerns seriously? Would help arrive in time? Days turned into an agonizing wait filled with uncertainty. Each morning she hoped for a response that would affirm her decision to reach out for support. Meanwhile, the pressure from the HOA loomed ever larger over her garden. The deadline for removing her plants was fast approaching, yet Lena refused to let anxiety paralyze her. Finally, one afternoon, a knock at her door jolted her out of her thoughts. Her heart raced as she opened it to find a messenger holding an official-looking envelope adorned with the unmistakable seal of the United Nations. This moment felt surreal. Anticipation clamored against fear as she accepted the letter, trembling slightly as she unfolded it. Inside was a meticulously written communication addressed specifically to the Homeowners Association. The letter outlined their obligations under various international biodiversity agreements, stressing their responsibility to protect vital green spaces like hers and condemning any actions taken against local conservation efforts based on strictly aesthetic preferences. Lena felt a rush of exhilaration course through her veins as she read on. This was more than just a piece of paper. It was a lifeline. The UN's intervention not only legitimized her fight, but elevated it to a level that would capture widespread attention. They recognized the significance of her work and its alignment with global conservation efforts, effectively rendering the HOA's claims frivolous in light of international commitment to biodiversity. As news about this intervention spread through town, Lena anticipated a shift in public perception. The stakes had risen dramatically. No longer was this solely a local matter. The involvement of the UN would amplify scrutiny on every action taken by the HOA. She could already imagine headlines proclaiming the HOA that tried to bulldoze science, stirring public sentiment toward support for grassroots conservation. The media frenzy began as local news outlets caught wind of Lena's situation. Reporters swarmed to interview everyone from concerned neighbors to environmental activists who rallied behind her cause. Social media exploded with hashtags advocating for biodiversity and supporting Lena's garden, each post further amplifying awareness and building momentum against the rigid framework that sought to silence conservationists. Support flooded in quickly from unfamiliar faces, environmental advocates sharing their own stories and urging communities everywhere to recognize the importance of preserving biodiversity. Diplomats took notice as well. Figures within prominent organizations watched these events unfold with keen interest, realizing they illuminated critical issues surrounding engagement in environmental protection at a grassroots level. Meanwhile, tension built within the HOA as their previous dismissal shifted to notable concern. Faced with mounting public scrutiny and growing outrage over actions taken against Lena, which now appeared not just foolish but detrimental to community values, their grip on control felt increasingly precarious. With residents who had once quietly nodded along now openly expressing their support for Lena's garden, it became clear that awareness was spreading. This wasn't merely about landscaping standards anymore. It had evolved into a movement advocating for education on ecological integrity and empowerment against ignorance. As days followed, Lena prepared herself for what lay ahead. Negotiations born from this unexpected surge of backing were inevitable. The outcome was still uncertain, but one thing felt concrete: she was no longer alone in this struggle. Empowered by the international recognition from the UN and bolstered by newfound allies, Lena understood that she stood at a critical crossroads, not just for herself, but for every voice advocating for nature in an increasingly indifferent world. In this climactic moment, beneath layers of stress and fear lay an undercurrent of hope that surged through her heart, a vibrant thread connecting each person who believed in and fought for preservation against those intending to erase it solely for appearance's sake. The stage was set for an unfolding drama where Lena's resilience would be tested against an entrenched bureaucracy determined to uphold conformity at all costs. With every fiber of her being, she embraced this challenge ahead, knowing that nature, and everything beautiful about it, needed champions like herself willing to advocate fiercely amidst adversity for all living things struggling for survival in their rightful places on Earth. The moment the United Nations letter was delivered to the Homeowners Association, it felt as if a dam had burst. News of Lena's struggle quickly spread like wildfire, igniting interest from local and international media alike. Reporters began to gather outside her garden, their cameras poised to capture the story that had unfolded in this quiet neighborhood, now thrust into the limelight. As the letter made its rounds, headlines blared across newspapers and websites. The HOA that tried to bulldoze science became a rallying cry that resonated with many who believed in the significance of biodiversity and conservation. Lena watched in awe as each article published painted a vivid picture of her fight against seemingly insurmountable odds. Media coverage highlighted not just her personal story, but also the implications of the HOA's actions on environmental advocacy at large. News outlets delved into discussions about the importance of green spaces, especially those that support endangered species. Environmentalists took notice, eager to amplify Lena's message and call into question the rigid standards set by homeowners associations that often stifled ecological efforts in favor of aesthetic conformity. Social media platforms exploded with activity as activists rallied behind Lena. Hashtags like Save Lena's Garden and Biodiversity Matters trended for days, encouraging supporters to share their own experiences with HOA regulations that hindered conservation efforts. Each post added fuel to the fire, transforming a local issue into a national conversation about environmental preservation and community engagement. Diplomats from various countries began expressing interest as well, recognizing that Lena's situation was emblematic of broader global challenges regarding biodiversity loss and habitat destruction. They saw her struggle as not just a personal battle, but a vital example of how grassroots movements could influence policy on a larger scale. The UN's involvement lent credibility to her cause. It was no longer just one botanist standing up against her neighborhood association. It was a matter that resonated with international commitments to protect the planet's natural heritage. As journalists interviewed neighbors, some who had initially sided with the HOA began to reconsider their positions. Testimonials emerged from community members who admired Lena's dedication and recognized the educational value her garden provided for local children and families. "I never thought about it this way," one neighbor admitted during an interview. "Lena's garden isn't just pretty, it's important for our environment." The escalating media attention forced the HOA into a defensive posture. They attempted damage control by issuing statements claiming they supported biodiversity, but were simply trying to maintain community standards. Yet these statements fell flat against the backdrop of widespread public support for Lena's cause. The more they tried to clarify their position, the more questions arose about their motives and commitment to environmental responsibility. Public opinion shifted rapidly. What was once perceived as an isolated struggle rapidly transformed into a communal movement advocating for ecological awareness in residential settings. The tension within the HOA escalated as board members faced growing dissent among residents who had previously remained silent or ambivalent about Lena's situation. In response to mounting pressure, some HOA members began reaching out to environmental experts seeking advice on how best to navigate this newfound scrutiny. They realized that maintaining their strict landscaping rules without considering conservation efforts could lead to significant backlash, both from residents and external observers. Meanwhile, environmental organizations seized this moment as an opportunity for outreach and education. They launched campaigns aimed at informing communities about sustainable landscaping practices and how residents could advocate for policies that aligned with ecological preservation rather than outdated aesthetic norms. As the weeks went by, Lena remained at the center of this whirlwind of activism and engagement, feeling both empowered and overwhelmed by suddenly being thrust into such a pivotal role in conservation advocacy. She found herself giving interviews and participating in community forums alongside local activists who sought to educate others on biodiversity's significance. Amidst all this newfound attention, she maintained her focus on her plants, tending to them daily while reflecting on how much had changed since she first planted those seeds years ago. The fight for her garden had become symbolic of something greater, a reminder that individual actions could inspire collective movements capable of challenging entrenched systems. Then came a pivotal moment when representatives from environmental NGOs approached Lena with a proposal. They wanted to organize a public event at her garden to raise awareness about biodiversity conservation while showcasing its beauty and ecological importance. This event would be a celebration of nature's resilience, a chance for community members who rallied behind her cause to come together in solidarity. Lena felt a rush of excitement mixed with apprehension. Hosting such an event could amplify their message even further, but would also put her directly back in the spotlight. Nevertheless, she recognized this was an opportunity not only for her garden, but also for broader conversations about how communities could embrace sustainability while ensuring their unique ecosystems thrived. As plans took shape for this gathering amid ongoing negotiations with the HOA regarding potential resolutions, it became clear nothing would ever be quite the same again, not just for Lena, but for everyone involved in this unfolding drama where passion clashed against indifference. The stage was set for change, fueled by collective voices demanding accountability and recognition of nature's intrinsic value within residential spaces everywhere, a testament to what could happen when individuals dared to stand firm against ignorance while embracing hope amidst adversity. The culmination of Lena's fight arrived with an air of victory that felt both surreal and exhilarating. After weeks of mounting pressure from public opinion, media attention, and growing dissent among its own members, the Homeowners Association found itself cornered. Unable to withstand the combined force of local and international scrutiny, they ultimately conceded defeat and withdrew their demands for Lena to dismantle her garden. The official announcement came during a heated HOA meeting, broadcast live as news cameras captured every moment. The board president, once condescending and dismissive toward Lena's efforts, stood reluctantly before the crowd. His eyes revealed a mixture of frustration and resignation as he announced, "In light of recent developments and overwhelming community support for Ms. Lena's garden," he hesitated, the weight of the words heavy on his tongue, "the HOA will no longer pursue the removal of her plants." The room erupted into applause and cheers. Lena could hardly believe what she was hearing. Her sanctuary would remain intact, a testament to her unwavering dedication to environmental preservation. Overwhelmed with emotion, she choked back tears as gratitude filled her heart. This victory was not just for her, it marked a significant moment for biodiversity advocacy and community resilience. Soon after the announcement, Lena received confirmation that her garden had been officially registered as a protected site under international biodiversity efforts. The United Nations recognized it as a vital resource, essential for preserving endangered plant species. A couple of weeks later, plaques were installed throughout the garden, detailing its importance not only to local ecosystems, but to global conservation goals as well. Each plaque told the story of the rare species housed in her sanctuary and educated visitors about their ecological contributions. They served as reminders of why preserving such spaces mattered, an impactful contribution that transcended personal attachment. As the garden thrived under its new status, Lena organized community tour to celebrate its protection and educate others about the importance of biodiversity. Neighbors who had previously doubted her efforts signed up enthusiastically to accompany school groups through the garden, eager to share both the joy and knowledge stemming from this remarkable project. Lena felt awe as children explored her garden with wonder, discovering butterflies fluttering among vibrant blooms and listening intently as she explained how each plant played a role in nature's intricate web. However, the fallout for the HOA was equally notable. The board president, facing backlash from residents who had once supported him but were now disillusioned by his handling of the situation, ultimately resigned in disgrace. His inability to recognize the value of environmental advocacy or to support community engagement marked a failure of leadership that could not go unchecked. Public sentiment turned against him as community members expressed their dissatisfaction with how he had represented not just their neighborhood, but also their values surrounding environmental stewardship. In his place, a new board emerged that was more attuned to contemporary issues regarding sustainability and conservation efforts. Eager to learn from past mistakes, they reached out to environmental experts for guidance, seeking policies that encouraged green initiatives rather than prohibiting them. When they approached Lena about collaborating on future projects aimed at enhancing biodiversity within community spaces, she welcomed their renewed vision with open arms. With time, the garden became a place of unity, a hub where residents gathered not only to celebrate its beauty, but also to engage in dialogue about conservation issues close to their hearts. Workshops highlighting sustainable gardening practices flourished alongside community events dedicated to protecting local wildlife habitats. Each initiative further reinforced a transformation within this once divided neighborhood. Through Lena's resilience and unwavering commitment to her cause, bonds formed that transcended prior differences. As she watched children play in her vibrant garden and listened to parents share stories about their own efforts towards sustainability, Lena couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come since first planting those seeds in her backyard a decade ago. Her fight had grown from personal ambition into a movement that inspired change and education on a wider scale. Lena remained hopeful about what lay ahead, not just for her garden or her neighborhood, but for communities everywhere grappling with similar challenges related to environmental preservation. She firmly believed that every small act mattered and could create ripples across society when fueled by passion and commitment toward greater awareness. In this newfound era of collaboration sparked by adversity, she recognized the power inherent in collective action, how individuals standing together could reshape policies impacting their lives and surroundings. The fight may have begun in isolation, but had blossomed into enlightenment shared among many. Ultimately, Lena understood that this victory symbolized something more profound than just retaining her beloved plants. It represented a triumph over ignorance and indifference, inviting more people into a conversation about protecting nature's wonders amid increasingly urban landscapes. With each passing day in her cherished garden, a sanctuary for rare species delicate yet resilient, she realized her role as both steward and advocate extended far beyond mere gardening. She was now part of an ongoing legacy dedicated to nurturing our planet's fragile gifts for generations yet unborn.